some people come in. So the topic today on this episode of Live Talk So Low would be lyrics versus lyricism versus vibes. For green screen. Hmm, hmm, interesting. Got a green screen. Nick, what you could do with the live on YouTube. I ain't never really. I think I did once, maybe once. I went live on YouTube directly, but I ain't never really did live on YouTube. Usually I use StreamYard though, but I tried something different. This on Live Talk So Low. And welcome to the live chat. If you're joining in, let me know where you're from. And what lyricism versus vibes in hip hop. Lyricism and vibes versus vibes in hip hop. And now when I thought of this topic, what came to mind is, hip hop, hip hop has evolved over the years and as it evolved with different things. And we have seen where a lot of things that a lot of times in hip hop, you'll see where now people don't really focus on lyrics anymore, but people are more involved, more tuned with, focus with what the artist got going on. That's right. That's right, Sam. Go Birds. Go Birds. That's right. Go Birds. Go Birds. You preaching to the choir right there. Go Birds. Yes, sir. I gotta wear my Birds helmet. I don't know if you saw the thumbnail, but on one side, on the lyricism side, I got picture of me, with the AI. They created like a AI version of me with the Eagles jersey and the Eagles hat on. And on the other side, you got me with the headphones without a hat, just vibing out. So getting back to the topic, you know, when it comes to lyricism, lyricism versus vibes, you think you have one half that might prefer the lyrics or they listen to the lyrics first when it comes to a song. You have the other half when they hear hip hop, they want to catch a vibe. And vibe music scene was be the biggest thing out of hip hop right now. Is vibes more than anything else. You don't really see too much lyrical songs get played on the radio too much unless it has a vibe to it. Now you got some artists that do both, but you know some people choose to just like the beat. You nowadays you just hear the beat. It's all beats now. It's not about lyrics. Back then, the 90s and the early 2000s, has to be lyrical or has to spit bars that really make you think or be philosophical on the track. But however, I think it's lost its balance a little bit because now it's just like the vibe music gets the most play and the lyricism has been a lost art of hip hop. So when an artist come with lyrics, it's like nobody really listens to it or people consider it boring. I know you guys might have heard, J. Cole, for example. Let's take him for example. Yeah, he makes vibe music too, but he likes to put lyrics in his music. He likes to make you think. He likes to tell stories in his songs, and he still stays true to the original art of lyricism and hip hop. So sometimes people I see on social media or random social media posts say, "Oh, J. Cole is boring. What's music is boring." Like, back then, if you had lyrics, your music was considered boring. People say, "Oh, that music is dope." People want to dance to, and don't get me wrong, people want to dance too. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, and it's not taking a shot at artists that just make vibe music. You have a time and place for that, and which is why I think this is a great topic to talk about because hip hop has evolved over the years and it's have its different subgenres. So you have trap music, you have drill, you have mumble rap, you have boom bap, which boom bap is the lyricism of hip hop that goes to traditional style of hip hop, like the old school style. Having a dope beat, but you're spinning bars. You're telling metaphors, you're using double entendres, multiple syllable rhyme patterns. You're doing punchlines. You're doing state dependent. You're really going into the craft. You're doing the art with lyrics. Doing alliteration, having wordplay, all different those different variables in the track when it comes to lyricism. And let me see. Sam said, "Oh, was the best at it. Lyricism plus vibes. Snoop a sleeper." Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's a good example, Sam. Hov was definitely one of the greats. What's up, White Boy Carl? What's good with it? Thank you for the sub. I appreciate you. I sub you back. Appreciate you. Appreciate you, White Boy Carl. Appreciate that. And Sam, you're right. That's definitely a great one. Hov is definitely a good person to mention. He definitely was great at that. That's a great example of somebody that used lyricism and vibes in his music. Like Big Pippin. Big Pippin was a good thing. Big Pippin was one of his songs that did that. That's like one of his most popular songs. I know. Remember watching the clip of him and doing a live performance. Everybody was singing it. Word for word, singing his verse word for word. So that's dope. And so you welcome, Carl. No problem. And I appreciate you, Sam, sharing this with Carl. If anybody else is out there in the audience that you'll like to share this topic with, you know, go ahead and share it with the person as well. On a canopy, my stamina be. Yeah, yeah, there you go right there. Multi-syllable rhyming right there. On a canopy, my stamina be. Boy, he was going in. And that's one of my favorite songs from Jay-Z. He had Bun B and Pimp C. They had both of the UGK members on the Pimp C was flowing on it. As a matter of fact, where Pimp C came in was so smooth at the end. Mm, that was so dope, and that's a great song too to show you the how lyricism, lyricism, and vibes definitely has the same thing. That has some of the same elements. Can be used in both songs. And UGK they brought the vibe to it. Jay Z brought the lyricism. So which is dope, which makes it a great song because you had a boast of both worlds in that song. Opposed to when you look at a Nas record, since we're talking about we're mentioning Nas too, Nas focuses on lyricism in his songs, but he also had some vibe songs too, but they weren't as popular or people really didn't rock with it because they felt like it wasn't Nas. Owe Me Something with Genuine. That was more like his vibe song. Then he had Uchi Wally Wally. You know, at the time when Jay Z and him was beefing, Jay Z made a reference to that track saying, Bodyguard had the best song. Bodyguard had the best song, had the best verse on that song. Then Nas came back and said, Eminem killed you on your own song. You know, had the lyricism things as well. And sometimes you might have an artist that's usually lyrical, might just go with a vibe record. Ludacris is very good at that. Ludacris is very good. Ludacris can be either on the lyricism side or he could be on the vibe side. With some of his songs, or some of his songs was both. it depends on the artist, and what I'm getting at is I think now that hip hop is evolved, not saying that lyricism is a lost art. Not to me, in my opinion. Of course, I catch the beat first, but then I'm gonna listen to the words. The words of the song or what the song talking about is gonna keep me listening. And the beat super dope. Of course I still listen, but really it's gonna get me more into with the song and try to understand the meaning of it is the lyrics. I think that when it comes to lyricism, when it comes to doing that, you have to have the you have to take a listen on a journey. When it comes to lyricism, I think that's the part of hip hop that's still relevant. I think it's not as big as it used to be, but I do appreciate artists that still does that because for the simple fact that the listener, it's good when you take the listener on a journey. When I'm listening to an artist's song, I want to go on a journey. I want to go on a journey with you. I want to be able to picture what you're talking about. Paint a picture. It's almost like you painted a picture. You know, hence the word artist. It's like the beat is your canvas. Whatever you paint, you know, let the listener know what you're trying to see or what you're trying to paint. That picture you're trying to paint for them, and it's up to the listener to get their own meaning, their own interpretation of the song or what you meant from the lyrics, which I think is dope. And then when you have the vibes, vibes usually when you have a vibe song, maybe like a Travis Scott. We listen to Travis Scott, you're gonna get a vibe. You know, Travis Scott is vibe music, which is cool. He gonna make you dance, make you move your feet. Vibe. You riding in the car, you might be on your way to the club, whatever, or to somebody party, or you just riding down the road. You just want to vibe out, chill out for the day. You probably throw some Travis Scott on, or people want to smoke. People do that. People who smoke or people who drink, that's a vibe thing. And Sam said Kendrick paint them lyrics probably the best. Indeed, indeed, Kendrick is a dope artist. Kendrick. He has his vibe songs too. Don't get me wrong, he can create vibe music too. But I put Kendrick more on the lyricism side. He's along with J. Cole because the way he paint pictures with his songs. Pimp the Butterfly. That's an underrated album in my opinion. A lot of people say they didn't like it, but to me, that's one of his best albums. And damn, I like it. But some people say they didn't like that either. To me, that was a good album. And I'm glad you said that, Sam, because Kendrick definitely paints pictures real good. Does it real great. I'll give you a good example. We're gonna be all right. That's a great picture. He painted the picture of the struggles of Black America that we go through every day, or what we deal with. And he was talking about all the police brutality going on, all the things going on with the government, how they marginalize the black community. He painted a picture to get the listener to see what the issues or the social issues that going on even today. That even though we went through that years ago, we're still going through it today. And he's not afraid to talk about that, which makes me like Kendrick's music because he can also give you that vibe, put it to a dope beat to get you to think and get you to see different things. Peer pressure by Kendrick Lamar's like a GTA 16. Interesting. Interesting. I gotta check that video out. I don't know how I passed that one up. I know he got a lot of dope music out there, and even before he got popping, Section 80, J. Cole produced one of the beats for one of his popular songs off there. Kendrick Lamar's been around for a minute, even with his mixtapes, So I don't know how I missed that one. I'll tell you another song I like that he painted a picture perfectly. It showed the toxicity that goes on in a lot of relationships today. You know how toxicity is very prominent today. It's like it's considered almost normal, but it's not healthy. Like in the song, do you remember the song I'm talking about when he was arguing with his girlfriend? Arguing with the girlfriend, was talking all that trash. It's like they were having a conversation. I thought that was dope. That's a good example of him painting a picture right there. Mm. because the whole time you listen to a song, it's almost like you listen to a couple arguing. You're hearing a couple arguing, and they're going back and forth. The man say something, did she say something? Man, that was dope. Matter of fact, let me look up that title of that song because it's on the Mr. Morale album. We Cry Together. Yeah, that's the song. We Cry Together. And how he put it together, him and the girl that was in the song with Taylor Page, how they both put that together, like that was a masterpiece, to show you what everyday things, this is some couples everyday thing, arguing back and forth, then at the end they make up, you know, which I thought was very clever the way they pitched it because the whole time it's like I'm listening to an argument. Who would have thought to turn an argument into a song? And it was that simple. It really wasn't like him just dropping straight punchlines and stuff, but it was just them going back and forth. And they did it so beautifully, like, damn, it's a dope song. Another great one of his songs is Poetic Justice. And that's another song describing a lady, painted a picture, make you think of a beautiful chick. You going down the street, you trying to kick game to a beautiful chick. And that's another picture painted. And swimming pools. He's talking about the struggles of addiction. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was talking about his uncle. If I'm not mistaken, I think he said something about that was based on his uncle and struggling with his drinking problems, painting a picture of what it's like for an alcoholic to deal with those type of struggles. So when it comes to lyricism, I think that's one of the lost arts of hip hop, and artists like Kendrick Lamar doing things like that. I think that is great. And also J. Cole does that too. He's telling the story on Forest Hill Drive. Well, that first song is I ain't never done this before, no. To talk about having his first time having sex. We all can relate to that. We all can relate to that. Being, nervous, don't know what to expect, not knowing what to do or acting like we knew what we were doing, but we really didn't. And then the whole time to find out that who we had our first time with, they didn't really know either. They were saying experience just as us in some scenarios for some people. And I thought that was dope because he touched on an everyday situation that no matter you from the hood, the country, the suburbs, or whatever, or you born with a silver spoon in your mouth, everybody been to that situation before at some point. And it's a song that everybody can relate to. Some might not look at it as deep, but it's something that simple or something that, you know, it's just like growing pains. That's something people can relate to. So I think that was a beautiful painted picture. J. Cole painted a picture. And then he also did it with role models too. He talked about how some women ask how some people just do different things, just try to follow different things of what they see, or talking about people changing who they are, or because they get certain material things, or people selling their soul for certain things, and come out to be something they're not really into, or what they weren't really working for, or what it's not cooked up to be. And another song of J. Cole on Painted Pictures is Love Yours. He, he talks about that, really nobody's life is better than somebody else's life. It's really like basically be grateful for what you have because you don't know what the other person had to get or go through to get to where they are. And you're looking at from their eyes, you're outside looking in, but that person life can be hard. That person could be getting beat on, or that person could be unhappy, unhealthy. But sometimes, you see where people who might not have as much or might just live a normal life be the happiest people because they appreciate what they have. So, which is another way to paint pictures, you know. Then on the vibe side, you might have somebody like Lil Yachty, you know, a good example, or Lil Uzi come with the vibe, or Migos, they come with the vibe, Bad and Bougie. Great song, that was number one song in the country back in 2017. And that was a great vibe song, it was a great club song. Every time you went to a party or any type of event, they playing that song. DJs had that on their playlist. Like you couldn't go nowhere, couldn't go to no club. This back when I was interning at a recording studio and I was going out every weekend, every other night, passing out flyers, promoting the network music conference. And I mean, I hear that song everywhere. Couldn't catch that, couldn't go nowhere without hearing that song. So vibe seems to be what's majority of being played now. But however, lyricism has I think has taken a back burner. Is it's starting to come back to the limelight, but there's only a few artists that really stick to that or really put that in their art compared to maybe you'll have somebody like, let's see, Moneybag Yo, straight vibe music. I ain't finna put no super lyrical thing or make it think. I'm just gonna talk about the vibe, okay, which is cool. And now I don't think it has really taken over completely where nobody doesn't listen to lyricism. I think lyricism is starting to make a comeback. And not saying vibe music is bad. Don't listen to it. I mean, it's cool. I like some vibe music. I pull up on some Travis Scott. I bought some Kid Cudi. Shoot, I bought some young music. It don't have to be all lyricism, but some artists tend to have vibe music with lyrics too. Like I was saying, Ludacris earlier. He's very good at doing that too as well, creating vibes while giving you some dope bars. And it's like the comical relief. You know, it depends on the artist you're listening to too, or it depends on what you're looking for. And it's on. So I think now we're having. It's not to say that one side is better than the other. It's just talking about the difference and how hip hop has evolved over the years. Before, that was just a club record. You had artists that just stuck to that. That's what they made. You know, give you an example. Look, John. Back in the day, we always had vibe music. You know, Look, John, the East Side Boys, vibe music. Crunk music. They call it. You just call it crunk music, but you get hype, go in the club, have fun. You sing along. When it comes to vibe music, I think that's created to get people to sing along to make it easier. Because what's the most part that people remember in a song? The hook. They're gonna sing along with it. Let me sing along with this, and then maybe have a dance to it. Might even come with a dance. Cupid. Flex. Good example. Good vibe song. People play that. People gonna go on the dance floor, start dancing, dance with it. You know, you might not. Some people might sing along with it, but you know, people they get people moving. So, so I guess it depends on the setting that you're at, and it comes down to what you're looking for when you want to listen to hip hop. That's what it comes down to. You know, yeah, people on this side might like the vibe. I just want to catch a vibe. I don't care about the punchlines, storytelling, alliteration, safety pinning. So you might be on the, and then you have to want to go on a journey. So I think it all comes down to what people want or what it comes to preference, and which is leading to up to this time. I think it's all a preference now. And you know, at a time, you know, I really would have respect, you know, artists that really just did vibe music at the time. Cause I come from the era where, you know, you had to have dope lyrics, you had to spit dope bars, or if you were spitting something rap, turn that shit off. Even if you was a vibe artist, even if you was just a what they call back then a club rapper, you better be coming with something. That shit had to be dope. It couldn't be simple. You had to have bars with that. Even back then, the vibe artists spit bars back then. But I think now we're coming to a thing where, you know, some people say hip hop's lack of balance. I think people now have a more of a choice now. I'm thinking that people are going more of a choice. You know, you have those that say, "Hey, I don't listen to music for the lyrics or to get a message. I don't look at it like that. I just think it's a vibe. I think all is a vibe to me, which is cool." Then you have those that like to analyze lyrics that wants to read their mind, so they want something that challenges them. You know, for me personally, it depends on what type of mood I'm in, but nine times out of ten, you catch me in my car, I'm gonna be bumping some DMX or some 50 Cent or some Jay Z or some Nas or some Tupac or some Biggie or some Big L or some Lupe, some J. Cole, some Kendrick, some Nas, some Jay Z, because those guys like to put lyrical things in this thing. Even 50 Cent, you know, he had his vibe music too in the club, but you know, he like to put messages in his songs as well. He like to do the artwork too. So it depends. It depends on personal preference, and you know, even I put even Ti in there. You know, I put him on the lyricism side. You know, he has songs that he's super lyrical in, and he's actually having the message in. I go straight to those artists. Those are my go-to mainly. You know, it's almost like I'm bumping music from when I was growing up, like it just dropped, because I'm more on the lyricism side. But somebody else on the vibe side might bump the music that we hear today that's real popular today. You know, I think the vibe music gets most of the popularity because we're living at a time where people just want to dance and people just want to get away. So they might not want to think too much when they hear music. So they look at music just as entertainment. But you know, music, whether the lyrics, whether it's just vibes or not, it's still a meaning in the lyrics, regardless if it's vibe or lyricism. It's just lyricism might dance around the message a little bit or might take you through a journey to get you to think or to leave it up to you. What's your interpretation on it? When vibes just strictly telling you what the song is about, what it's trying to get you to do, and just have fun, basically. Sometimes it doesn't have a deeper meaning sometimes, but even then, if you pay close attention, an artist can also sneak lyricism in the vibe music to get you to listen. Lupe did that next to it. If you ever get a chance to, anybody on it, look up Lupe's song next to it, and you see what I'm talking about. You know, it comes off as a vibe song, but really it's a lyricism song because the simple fact he's talking about people not being happy for what they have or always looking at what somebody else got. thinking that what somebody else has is better. You know, a good example of it, like of a line he said, but the Honda is the shit when you're jogging next to it. Which is said the Honda is the shit when it's jogging the shit next to it. So the person with the Honda might think, oh, I just got a regular old Honda. Really grateful for what they have. They're always looking at what the next person got instead of being focusing on what they have or not being happy where they are, or you're never gonna get what you have because what you want because you're not appreciating what you have now. Which is a great song that came off as a vibe. But if you're somebody like me that listens to the lyrics, I get what he was saying, which I think is a good example of lyricism being used in vibes. So sometimes it's not always a song just fits in the lyricism lane. It goes in the vibe lane too. But it's like picking through the difference. Some people point out the difference. Some people might catch on to it. Some people might not. They might just say, "Oh, it's just a song. I'm just vibing because the beat is." But the lyrics are there. I know people might have heard Tupac. If you're a fan of Tupac, Tupac multiple times said, in an interview saying, "Don't listen to the music, listen to the words," which is true. The words mean something. Even if the song is trying to get you to dance, there's still words there, whether the message is super lyrical or not. There's a message in every song, which is I'm getting at. It depends on the vibe that you're looking for. It could be a bad vibe or song, could be a good vibe or song. Music is a spiritual connection. So, like Pac said, don't listen to the words, don't listen to the music, listen to the words. Because the words are saying something. And Pac is one of the people that's on the lyricism side, but he also his songs that tend to be lyricism also created vibes because Pac knew how to make people dance. He knew how to spit some philosophical stuff. Just dance and nod your head. You just nod your head. But and that's when he came out and said, what I was saying earlier, don't listen to the music, listen to the words. So even his dance songs had messages in it. Only Pac could pull that off. Biggie did too in some of his songs as well. But Biggie was more of the vibes, the lyrical, but his music was more of a vibe though. Even though he was super lyrical, his music was more the vibe. He was more of the party and bullshit stuff. Versatile, the bragging, Playboy stuff. Not a Biggie thing. And Pop was more like, hey, I can make you dance too, but also you're gonna get this message too. You know, I'm gonna throw this message in here. If you just listen to the words and just not the music, then you'll catch what I'm saying. I'm gonna get your attention somehow. Pop was great at that. A lot of people say, "Oh, Pop was a thug." Pop. Pop had his music. Pop had his gangster music too. But even then, he's trying to show you a message or something. You might get in the vibe that, hey, this is a great gangster song, but Pop actually, hey, this is a lyricism song. If you listen to what I'm saying, I'm peeping you on game. So I think this all comes down to sometimes artists does both, and some things can go on the lyricism side, and sometimes it could be a vibe. And I think it depends on how you interpret it and what you like. Because at the end of the day, art is subjective. What seems like a vibe to somebody else is something totally different, has a totally different meaning, because it all has a meaning. It's all up to the listener's interpretation. And sometimes you don't see it right away, but if you keep listening or you go back and listen to the song, Sometimes I go back listen to songs back when I was a kid. I'm just dancing to it, not really knowing what the words is. So I got a little bit older, and I go back and say, "Hold up, that's what they was. That's what they meant. Hold up." I'm thinking this a dance song the whole time. This song's actually got a hidden message in it, and I didn't really pay attention to it because I was too busy paying attention to the beat as a youngster. When I went back and started really getting into understanding the lyrics, when you get, when you're young, you don't really think about it, just saying, "Oh, this sound dope, super fire," you might catch a little bit, some of it was the break, but a lot of times you go back and listen to it, it's like, damn, they're saying all that, and then you read the lyrics and look it up, it's like, oh, now I get now what was the intention for that song. So it's interesting how lyricism and vibes plays a prominent role in hip hop and how it's a difference between the two, and how sometimes the, the two end up intertwining because the artist decides to take the listener on a journey, but also give you a dope vibe, and which sometimes can mistakenly be just for a vibe, but really when the words are right there in the song. Sometimes a message can be so simple and to the point that you really kind of miss it, but it's right there in front of you. It makes me bring another reference to Tupac again. That Pac might not have been the most super lyrical person, or might not throw heavy punchlines or heavy metaphors, but when he did, it hit. It's like, oh, Pac was just straight up telling you the message. He was straight up trying to get the message to you, so he broke it down to you simpler. Sometimes simple was better, but however, he was still lyrical with it because he still knew how to rhyme. He knew how to put the perfect rhyme scheme together. So that's a good part of why people might have thought it was just a vibe, or he might end up on the vibe side, or it might not be considered lyricism when it came to his music because a lot of times his message was simple to the point. His lyrics were simple to the point. He didn't really go throw a lot of loops at you sometimes, but sometimes he just get to you. He said, "Look, I'm gonna give it to you straight how it is." But you miss the message so much because it's so much in your face. You're so focused on the beat, you miss the message. So I'm gonna leave you with this. In the words of Tupac said, "Don't just listen to the music, listen to the words." I'm out. Hope you have a blessed night. Peace.